In the summer of 1944, somewhere high above the vast blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean, a lone American fighter pilot banked his aircraft toward an approaching formation of Japanese fighters. The aircraft he flew was not sleek. It was not elegant. In fact, many enemy pilots had already begun mocking it. They called it the Fat Fighter. Heavy, bulky, too slow, they believed, to compete with the legendary Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0. But on that particular afternoon, 15 Japanese fighters would discover something they had not expected. Because the aircraft they mocked carried something far more dangerous than speed. It carried armor, it carried firepower, and it carried a pilot who refused to back down. What happened next would become one of the most astonishing aerial encounters of the Pacific War. A moment when a supposedly inferior aircraft faced overwhelming odds and turned the sky into a battlefield of survival. Please subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life. This is the story of how a single American Fat Fighter confronted 15 Japanese Zeros and how the outcome stunned both sides of the war. By mid-1944, the Pacific War had entered a decisive phase. Following brutal fighting across Guadalcanal, the Solomon Islands, and New Guinea, Allied forces were beginning to push steadily toward the Japanese home islands. Air superiority had become the key to that advance. Without control of the skies, neither side could move fleets, land troops, or supply distant island bases. The Japanese Navy relied heavily on one aircraft to maintain that control, the Mitsubishi A6M0. When the Zero first appeared in combat in 1940, it shocked Allied pilots. It was incredibly agile. Lightweight and maneuverable, the aircraft could outturn nearly every fighter the Allies possessed during the early years of the war. Many inexperienced Allied pilots paid the ultimate price for underestimating it. But by 1944, the situation had begun to change. The United States had introduced new fighters specifically designed to counter the Zero's strengths. One of those aircraft was the Grumman F-6F Hellcat. Built by the Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, the Hellcat was not designed for elegance. It was designed for survival. Compared to the slender Zero, the Hellcat looked massive. Its fuselage was thick, its wings were wide, and its powerful Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine produced over 2,000 horsepower. The aircraft also carried formidable firepower. 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns, capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute. Just as important, the Hellcat carried something the Zero lacked: armor. Japanese fighter doctrine emphasized agility over protection. As a result, the Zero had very little pilot armor and no self-sealing fuel tanks. One burst of heavy machine gun fire could ignite it instantly. But old habits die hard in war. Many Japanese pilots still believed the Hellcat was too heavy to compete with them, too slow, too clumsy. In their eyes, it was simply a fat aircraft trying to imitate a fighter. They would soon learn otherwise. The events of this encounter unfolded during one of the many intense air patrols flown by American carrier pilots in the Pacific Theater. By 1944, U.S. Navy task forces operated vast carrier groups capable of launching dozens of fighters simultaneously. Their mission was simple: intercept incoming Japanese aircraft before they could reach the fleet. On this particular afternoon, radar operators aboard an American carrier task force detected incoming contacts. Multiple aircraft, closing fast. Within minutes, several F-6F Hellcats from a nearby carrier squadron launched to intercept. Among them was one pilot flying slightly ahead of the others. His Hellcat climbed steadily toward the incoming formation. The Pacific sky stretched endlessly around him. Below, the ocean rolled in deep blue waves. Above, scattered clouds drifted lazily across the horizon. But ahead, danger was approaching. By approximately 1400 hours, the American pilot spotted them. Dots in the distance. At first only shadows against the sun, then shapes, then unmistakable silhouettes. Japanese fighters, Zeros, and not just a few. As the formation grew closer, he counted them. 5, 8, 10, more. Soon, it became clear that he was facing nearly 15 enemy aircraft. For a moment, the odds were staggering. One fighter against 15. Many pilots might have turned back, but turning back could expose the fleet behind him. Carrier groups were vulnerable. If enemy aircraft broke through, they could strike ships, damage carriers, and kill hundreds of sailors. So the Hellcat pilot held his course. The Japanese formation spotted him too. To them, the sight must have seemed almost amusing. A single American fighter approaching their formation. In the Agile Zero, Japanese pilots had spent years perfecting dogfighting tactics. They had defeated countless Allied pilots early in the war. To them, this large American aircraft likely looked slow, heavy, easy prey. The formation split into attack positions. Zeros dove toward the Hellcat from different angles, hoping to overwhelm it quickly. Their strategy was simple: swarm the target, attack from above and behind, exploit the Hellcat's supposed lack of maneuverability. But what they didn't realize was that the Hellcat had been designed precisely for this kind of encounter. American pilots had learned painful lessons earlier in the war. Never try to outturn a Zero. Instead, use speed, use firepower, strike hard, and break away. And that is exactly what the Hellcat pilot prepared to do. The distance closed rapidly. 2 miles, 1 mile. Now just seconds separated the aircraft. The Pacific sky was about to erupt into violence. The first Japanese fighter dove toward the Hellcat from above. Its wings glinted in the sunlight as it rolled into firing position. Machine guns flashed, tracer rounds streaked across the sky. The Hellcat pilot pulled hard on the controls, diving sharply to avoid the attack. The large fighter accelerated rapidly in the dive, its powerful engine roaring. Another Zero moved in behind him, then another. Soon the sky around the Hellcat filled with enemy aircraft. The pilot pushed his aircraft to its limits. He rolled sharply to the left, then climbed, then dove again. But the Zeros were everywhere. One Japanese pilot managed to close within firing range. Bullets ripped through the air. Several rounds struck the Hellcat's wings, but the American aircraft kept flying. Its armor absorbed the hits. That was something the Japanese pilots were not accustomed to seeing. Many earlier Allied fighters had been fragile, but the Hellcat was built like a flying tank. Then the American pilot saw his chance. One Zero had overshot during a diving attack. For a brief moment, it crossed directly in front of the Hellcat's guns. The pilot squeezed the trigger. 6 Browning machine guns erupted in thunder. A stream of .50 caliber bullets tore into the Japanese aircraft. Smoke burst from the Zero's engine. Flames followed. Within seconds, the aircraft spiraled downward toward the ocean. 1 enemy fighter destroyed, but 14 remained. The battle intensified. Zeros dove in waves. Their pilots tried to surround the Hellcat, cutting off escape routes. The American fighter twisted through the sky, using its speed to stay ahead of them. Another Japanese fighter approached from the side. Again, the Hellcat's guns fired. Again, heavy bullets ripped through fragile aluminum. Another Zero erupted in smoke, but the pressure continued. Japanese fighters attacked relentlessly. Machine gun fire flashed across the sky. The roar of engines filled the air. For several brutal minutes, the Hellcat pilot fought simply to survive. It seemed impossible. 15 fighters against 1. Any mistake would be fatal. And yet the American pilot kept maneuvering, kept firing, kept fighting. The key advantage of the Hellcat began to reveal itself. Speed in the dive. The American pilot pushed the aircraft downward again, forcing the Zeros to follow. But the Hellcat could dive faster than the lighter Japanese fighters. The distance between them stretched. Then, suddenly, the pilot pulled up sharply. 1 Zero overshot. Another struggled to climb after him. Both briefly crossed into the Hellcat's firing arc. The guns thundered again. 1 Zero exploded in flames. Another lost a wing and tumbled downward. 3 kills now. The Japanese formation began to lose coordination. Instead of attacking in tight formation, individual pilots rushed forward, eager to claim the kill. But this only made them vulnerable. One by one, the Hellcat pilot exploited their mistakes. Dive, climb, fire, break away, again and again. The sky became a deadly cycle of pursuit and counterattack. Japanese fighters began falling. Smoke trails marked their descent toward the ocean below. For every attack they launched, the Hellcat answered with overwhelming firepower. The American aircraft's 6 machine guns delivered devastating bursts. And unlike the fragile Zero, the Hellcat could absorb punishment. Bullet holes appeared across its wings and fuselage, yet it continued flying. By now, the engagement had lasted several minutes. What began as an easy victory for the Japanese had become a nightmare. The American pilot had already destroyed multiple attackers. Others had been damaged. Some began to withdraw. But the Hellcat continued fighting, against all odds, against all expectations, until the once confident formation had been shattered. When the battle finally ended, the Pacific sky had grown strangely quiet. The surviving Japanese fighters broke off and retreated. Below them, the ocean held the wreckage of several aircraft that would never return home. The American pilot, still flying his battered Hellcat, turned back toward his carrier group. His aircraft was scarred with bullet holes, fuel was running low, but the fighter had survived, and so had its pilot. Encounters like this one demonstrated exactly why the F-6F Hellcat became one of the most successful naval fighters of the Second World War. By the end of the war, Hellcat pilots were credited with destroying over 5,000 enemy aircraft. The aircraft achieved a remarkable kill-to-loss ratio of nearly 19-1 against Japanese fighters. The once-mocked fat fighter had proven itself again and again in combat, and Japanese pilots who once underestimated it soon learned a hard lesson. Size did not mean weakness, armor did not mean slowness, and when combined with skilled pilots, the Hellcat became one of the most formidable weapons in the Pacific War. The skies over the Pacific would continue to see fierce battles until the war's final months. But moments like this encounter revealed a turning point. American industry, technology, and training had begun to overwhelm Japan's once dominant air forces. And the pilots who flew aircraft like the Hellcat carried that advantage into every battle. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.